Before there was East and West, there were two titans, Rome and Parthia. One wielded legions and laws, the other rode with arrows and silence. They never fully conquered each other, yet their clash shaped the world we live in. This wasn't just war, it was a centuries-long chess match across deserts, mountains, and empires. This is the story of ambition, arrogance, and endurance. This is the story of the Roman and Parthian Wars. In the dusty heartlands of Persia, a horse-riding tribe known as the Parni began to rise. Under Arsaces' eye, they carved out a kingdom from the crumbling Seleucid Empire and planted the seeds of what would become the Parthian Empire. Meanwhile, far to the west, the Roman Republic, fresh from victories in the Punic Wars, expanded with cold precision across the Mediterranean. Though separated by distance, both powers were on a collision course that would stretch over centuries. By the 2nd century BCE, Rome had already declared itself the master of the Mediterranean world. Its legions were unmatched in discipline and numbers. The Parthians, on the other hand, were building a mobile, decentralized empire, relying on cavalry dominance and swift communication. Rome favored heavy infantry and sieges. Parthia thrived in open deserts and horse archer ambushes. Two empires, two philosophies of war. The lines were being drawn. It was ambition, not defense, that first ignited the war. Marcus Licinius Crassus, Rome's wealthiest man and member of the first triumvirate, sought glory in the East. In 53 BCE, he led 7 legions across the Euphrates, eager to rival Caesar's conquests in Gaul. But he underestimated the desert, the distance, and most fatally, the Parthians. At Carrhae, Parthian general Surenna unveiled the future of cavalry warfare. His mounted archers circled the Romans endlessly, raining arrows with terrifying precision. Crassus had no answer. Roman squares broke under the storm. Crassus himself was captured, executed, and allegedly had molten gold poured into his mouth, mocking his greed. Rome had tasted bitter defeat. Carrhae not only exposed Roman vulnerabilities, but gave the Parthians prestige on the world stage. It was a stunning upset, one of the worst defeats in Roman history. The aftermath was felt far beyond the battlefield. The Roman Senate fell into panic, and Eastern satrapies viewed Parthia with renewed respect. For Parthia, this was more than just a battle won. It was a declaration of parity with Rome. A generation later, Mark Antony, desperate for Eastern prestige to match Caesar's legacy, gathered a grand force and marched toward Media. Learning from Crassus, he prepared for the terrain, but not for Parthian diplomacy and winter's wrath. His siege engines lagged behind. His allies betrayed him. Snowstorms shredded his supply lines. Antony's retreat was humiliating. Thousands perished in icy mountain passes. Though he survived, his eastern ambitions died there. and the east remained untouched by Roman hands. The Parthians had defended their empire once more, not by decisive battles, but by terrain, time, and tactics. Antony's failed campaign cemented the idea that Parthia was unconquerable. The Romans began to fear the vastness of the east, the open plains, the endless deserts, and an enemy that refused to fight by conventional means. In the Roman psyche, the east became synonymous with mystery and death. Antony's disaster reinforced the importance of alliances and logistics. Yet, even with all precautions, Parthia could not be tamed. Caught between Rome and Parthia was Armenia, a kingdom both empires viewed as strategic and expendable. Whichever side held Armenia could strike the other. And so began centuries of intrigue, assassinations, puppet kings, and shifting alliances over its throne. Augustus, Rome's first emperor, traded swords for diplomacy. He retrieved the lost Roman standards from Parthia, not by war, but negotiation. It was a symbolic triumph that restored Roman pride after Carrhae. Yet Armenia remained a bloody chessboard, soaked in betrayal and ambition. Armenia's geopolitical role cannot be understated. It was a buffer, a corridor, and a battleground. Its rugged terrain and fiercely independent kings made it difficult to dominate. Yet both empires endlessly tried. Roman legions often clashed with Parthian-backed forces in its highlands. Marriage alliances, political assassinations, and covert missions were all part of the unending struggle for Armenia. It symbolized the complexity of the Roman and Parthian conflict, not just war, but strategy. A century after Augustus, the warrior Emperor Trajan launched the most aggressive Roman invasion of Parthian lands. In 114 CE, Roman legions stormed through Armenia, advanced into Mesopotamia, and even captured the Parthian capital, Ctesiphon. Rome seemed on the cusp of Eastern conquest. But the empire had overreached. Revolts flared behind the lines. Logistics crumbled under the Mesopotamian heat. When Trajan died in 117 CE, his successor, Hadrian, abandoned the gains, choosing defense over glory. The Euphrates once again marked the imperial frontier. Trajan's campaign was Rome's high-water mark in the east. His ambitions reflected the eternal Roman desire to surpass Alexander the Great, but the conquest was short-lived. Holding territory was far more difficult than seizing it. Disease, rebellion, and sheer distance forced Rome into retreat. The dream of conquering Parthia faded again, replaced by the grim acceptance of stalemate. The Parthians' strength lay not in numbers, but in motion. Their elite cataphracts, heavily armored cavalry, punched through enemy lines, while their agile horse archers peppered from a distance, retreating only to lure and strike again. Rome, in contrast, relied on infantry discipline and fortified camps. Over time, Rome adapted. New tactics, auxiliary cavalry, and flexible formations helped blunt Parthian strengths. Yet in the vast deserts and endless plains, Rome was never truly at home. Terrain, climate, and local allies always gave Parthia the edge in prolonged campaigns. The Roman learning curve was steep but undeniable. Commanders began integrating Syrian and Gallic cavalry, using mobility to counteract the Parthian tactics. Shield walls evolved to protect from arrows, while scouts were trained to detect ambushes. However, Rome always struggled with the strategic depth of Parthia. It was not one city or one battlefield that had to be conquered. It was an entire ecosystem of deserts, alliances, and rapid mobilization. Even as Roman armies improved, they remained outsiders in Parthian terrain. In the late 2nd century CE, Emperor Septimius Severus once again led Rome into Parthian territory. He besieged and briefly captured Ctesiphon, claiming spoils and glory. Yet like Trajan, he could not hold what he took. The empire lacked the manpower and motivation to permanently govern the East. Each Roman invasion took an enormous toll. Parthia would lose cities, but Rome lost something greater: credibility. No matter how many times they took Ctesiphon, it would always slip away. The Euphrates remained the unbreakable border. Severus's campaigns were marked by brutality and ambition. His soldiers looted Ctesiphon, enslaving thousands. Rome celebrated, but the reality was different. The victory was hollow. It brought no long-term benefit, no lasting stability. Rome could wound Parthia, but it could never kill it. The Eastern Empire always recovered, often stronger than before. Rome's message was clear, but so was Parthia's response: we will endure. While Rome remained distracted by internal instability, Parthia, too, faced its decline. Its noble families grew powerful and unruly. Regional rulers acted more like independent kings than subjects of the Arsacid dynasty. The decentralized nature that once gave Parthia strength now sowed chaos. By the early 3rd century, rebellion brewed. A Persian noble named Ardashir rose in the south, uniting the fractured satrapies under a new banner, the Sassanid dynasty. In 224 CE, the Parthian Empire fell, replaced by a more aggressive and centralized enemy. A new chapter of East versus West had begun. The fall of Parthia was not caused by Rome, but by internal erosion. The Arsacids could not maintain unity. Their nobility, once their backbone, became their weakness. Ardashir offered a new vision, a resurgent Persian nationalism rooted in Zoroastrian tradition and central authority. When the Sassanids rose, they were not inheriting the Parthian struggle. They were transforming it. A deadlier, more organized, and ideologically driven empire now faced Rome. The Roman and Parthian Wars did not end with a decisive battle. nor did they yield lasting territorial changes. But they left behind a blueprint for all future East-West conflicts. Strategy over slaughter, patience over power, and the power of terrain over brute strength. Rome had learned that military might had limits. Parthia had proven that a decentralized, mobile empire could withstand the greatest army in the world. Their centuries-long chess match influenced everything from Byzantine-Persian wars to Cold War ideology. East and West, forever divided, forever rivals. The Roman-Parthian struggle reshaped how empires waged war. Logistics, alliances, and terrain became as important as sword and shield. It influenced military theorists, from Byzantine generals to Napoleonic strategists. In the ashes of battles and forgotten treaties, a deep philosophical divide emerged, one of conquest versus resistance, of centralized ambition versus decentralized endurance. Their clash was not a relic, it was a rehearsal for history's future. Though Rome eventually crumbled and Parthia gave way to Persia, the memory of their conflict lives on. In ruined forts, buried standards, and scarred frontiers, the echoes of their war remain. Trade would flourish again across the Silk Road, but distrust lingered. This was not merely a war of borders, it was a war of identity. Rome saw itself as the civilizer, Parthia as the guardian of tradition, two empires, two destinies, and between them, the lands that bore the scars of their endless, grinding war. The Roman and Parthian Wars were not just history, they were the beginning of the world we inherited. Empires rise, empires fall, but some rivalries echo through eternity. The Roman-Parthian Wars were more than a series of battles. They were a clash of civilizations, of military ideologies, of identities. One empire marched with discipline, the other rode with agility. Neither could break the other. And though both are gone, their struggle shaped the geopolitical heartbeat of the ancient world and cast a shadow that still lingers today. From the deserts of Mesopotamia to the highlands of Armenia, the scars of their war are etched in history. And as we look at today's East and West, perhaps, in some way, we're still living in the aftermath. If this story stirred something in you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more epic histories from the ancient world. Because the past isn't gone, it's just waiting to be remembered.